What is the West? When we talk about the Western world, are we talking about a group of countries we can point to and say, this group has this, and this in common, common history, common values, common culture, etc.? Is the West Europe, plus countries where people of European descent form the strong majority of the population, plus any country where so-called European culture and traditions reign? Is that the West? The term the West almost becomes a lazy term in a lot of discussions and debates I've seen. And I don't think I've ever seen a person challenged on the spot and asked to define the West, asked to define what they mean. I think some might find it difficult to give an adequate definition. I suppose the idea of the western part of Earth has its beginnings in Greco-Roman civilization, doesn't it? Yeah. If by the West a person means Europe and countries of colonial origin, then we can point to a definite group of nations and call it the Western world, can't we? Talking about countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, as well as many South American countries when I say countries of colonial origin. But colonialism greatly affected Africa and Asia too, didn't it? If I were to qualify the West as being anywhere so-called European traditions are followed, what would we then call the West? Is Christianity a European tradition? With colonialism came the spread of Christianity, right? Where would Christianity be without European colonialism, I wonder? Is the nation-state a European tradition? Post-colonial societies formed nation-states, were made to actually, and because artificial and sometimes arbitrary borders were created, this caused problems and conflicts and resistance to governments and laws, friction. A lot of negative post-colonial fallout is still with us today, of course. Yeah. In the 20th century, during the Cold War, there were three worlds, weren't there? The West being the United States and all countries aligned to the superpower. The West was the first world, the Eastern Bloc the second world, and then the third world was countries who didn't necessarily align with either the capitalist West or the communist East. And because a lot of so-called third world nations were very poor, the term third world country is still used today in a pejorative sense. For some people, they are still thinking in Cold War terms, aren't they? Western world and First World are interchangeable. And despite the fall of the Soviet Union and all these former communist states in Eastern Europe becoming members of the EU and modernizing their economies and creating democratic institutions, old world mentalities still persist. Yeah. How many people, when they say the Western world, simply mean the Western Hemisphere only? Well, our nation, the UK, and France and Russia, and the United States, and several African countries exist in both hemispheres, don't they, technically speaking? Morocco is a Western country, technically speaking, whereas, say, Italy is part of the Eastern Hemisphere, an Eastern country with Eastern traditions, right? Yeah, but people don't see it that way, do they? Perceptions don't necessarily match realities, you know what I'm saying? Could it be argued that from a certain perspective, the West is a non-Western invention? It's a concept that exists in some Muslim societies and other societies. There's this idea in some countries of the decadent, godless West, where perversion reigns and immorality is widespread. I'm quite sure there exists various concepts of the Western world which are based largely on prejudice and ignorance. Of course, there are more than a few people who equate the modern process of globalization with Western imperialism. I believe this to be a misguided view. People who hold this view and related opinion should really try to do a bit more reading and research, I would suggest. I'd be interested to hear how you, the viewer, would define the Western world and its characteristics, assuming you would care to do so. Anyway, catch you later, folks. Peace.